I haven't written a line of code in 6 months, and it's just weird to say out loud. I spent over 2 decades writing code: Python, C Sharp, TypeScript, SQL. I mean, wherever the job needed, I figured it out. Now I spend my time reviewing code I didn't write and shipping features I didn't build, thanks to Claude Code. Claude Code is easy to install. Sign in, open a folder, start chatting. But after a few sessions, you hit some walls. There's no memory between chats, no structure for complex builds, agents that overwrite each other's work. I mean, here's a stack that solved all of that for me. Hi, I'm Chuck, an AI engineer who's been using Claude daily. In this video, I'm walking you through my complete setup, not just installation, but the 3 tools that made it production grade, that made me productive using Claude Code on production software. So the components are structured process, memory, and parallel agents. And at the end, I have a little bonus tip to speed you up. Let's get into this. Before I talk about Claude Code, let's start at the beginning. What is Claude Code? Claude Code is a tool from Anthropic, released in early 2025, that turns instructions into working code. Sounds magical, I know, but that's what it does. If you're skeptical, I understand. So was I. It really sounds too good to be true, but that's what it does. When Claude first launched as a CLI tool, I downloaded it, I opened my terminal, and I stared at the blinking cursor. I thought, yeah, I'm an engineer. Yeah, I've spent decades in terminals. But something about writing code in a terminal, it just felt like driving a Ferrari in reverse. Technically possible, but why would you? For some, using the CLI is like peanut butter and jelly. They just go together. But that's just not me. And then Anthropic released the Visual Studio Code extension for Claude Code. Seriously, it felt heaven sent. Suddenly, it just clicked. Visual, intuitive. This is how AI coding should be. My setup is pretty straightforward. I install Claude Code extension for Visual Studio Code, and it just works. Once you install it, you need to sign in. If you're using an API key, you have to provide that. If you have a subscription like I do, you have to sign in with it. And that's it. Claude Code is ready to go. Open the folder and start telling Claude Code what you want. It's that simple. 12 months ago, this would be April 2026, I would have never dreamed of not writing code. I wrote code for over 2 decades, but I haven't written a line since November of 2025. Now I spend my days designing AI features, reviewing code, and improving on my AI development cycle, which changes every new release of a frontier model. It constantly needs to be improved. Claude Code works great out of the box, but as I mentioned, there are a few tools that will help you. You could even call them like force multipliers. The first tool I use is not really a tool. It's more of a set of skills packaged together. Without going too deep down the rabbit hole, let's define what a skill is. A skill is just a set of instructions for Claude to follow when doing specific certain actions. Really, at the end of the day, it's just a markdown file that you give Claude Code, and it follows instructions when it meets the certain like task trigger or trigger for that event or for that skill. The one I use is called Superpowers. What it does is when Claude identifies a certain task, it loads the right required skills, and then Claude follows the instructions in the skill. What this does is gives Claude a repeatable way to solve the same problem. And so let me give you an example. When you design something, you tell Claude, I want to create a folder or a feature called user login. There's a skill called brainstorming that prompts Claude to ask revealing questions for achieving the outcome. Once you've answered the questions, Claude then goes away and puts together a nice design and presents you with a design to review. And then if you agree, it'll implement the design. It gives you you and your agent a coding roadmap to follow. And probably the most important piece is if it's a process, you can improve upon this process. So let's look at the Claude or the Superpowers Git repo. So I pulled up the Superpowers Git repo. It talks about how to install it, has an installation instructions. Let's open the terminal up here. I already have it open. If you type in /plugin, and then we'll go to the marketplace. You can see I already have Superpowers installed in the marketplace, and you can see here the second line that I already have the Superpowers skills installed. And so how this would work is you go down here, you grab the first line, you paste it in. This installs the Superpowers marketplace in the Claude. Then you go down to the second line, and this actually installs the Superpowers skills from the marketplace. The second tool I use is called Serena. But let me tell you why you need it. Picture this. It's late. You've spent hours building a complex feature. The auth is working, database schema is solid, you're wiring up the API. But it's been a long day, and you're getting tired, so you called it a night. The next morning, you open your new chat and say, let's continue with these changes, the API changes. Claude responds, huh? I don't see any API changes or endpoints. Hey, would you like me to help you set those up? Your context is gone. Window's updated overnight. You close the window. You hit the conversation limit. Does it really matter? You're starting over. You have to re-explain the architecture, the decisions, the gotchas that you discovered together. This happens every time you start fresh, until you add Serena. The Serena doesn't load your old conversations verbatim. That would be impossible. But what it does is distills the previous sessions into a summary. Think of this as like leaving breadcrumbs behind. When you start a new chat, Serena gives Claude the context. Here's what we built. Here's how the auth layer works. Here's why we chose this database schema. Claude picks up where you left off instead of starting from zero. This has been invaluable for long-running projects. Some builds have multiple phases, different deliverables. As the app grows, it gets harder to explain how everything this kind of fits together. Serena handles that for you. It gives each new context a basic understanding of the system. It's like memory for your coding agent. Let's look at the GitHub page for Serena. I'm not sure how to say the author's name, but here are the instructions on how it works, diagrams, and then different plugins. You can go to a document page for how to install different coding agents. It's pretty straightforward. So here's how you do it in JetBrains. It works great. But we're not going to use the GitHub instructions. We're going to ask Claude to install it for us. Check this out. But let's do this. So what I'm asking Serena to do is to install locally in a mcp.json file. Look at that. Started right up. There it is. You can see the folder. The Serena folder was created. Okay, we're good. The next tool I want to talk about really isn't a tool. It's not even a Claude plugin. And honestly, it has nothing to do with AI. But it's become a valuable part of my workflow. I learned about Worktrees the hard way. I had 2 Claude instances running. One of them was building an end-to-end feature, and one is refactoring the database. They shouldn't have crossed paths, but they did, and they started overwriting each other's work. It was a mess. Each agent checked in half-implemented versions of the code and claimed confidently that they were done. Worktrees solved this problem by effectively making copies of the repo. Each agent gets its own folder to work in. And that way, when files change, they're changed in isolation from the other agent. You might be thinking, but Chuck, how are these changes merged? Yeah, well, good question. you check in your code to Git. Worktrees are actually a Git concept. And you use Git's merge process. And so it just works. So now that you know the tools, let me show you how they work together. Okay, let's dive into how to handle Worktrees. I know I talked about how they work, but let's talk about how I include them in the project. So they're included two ways. One way is when I install Superpowers, it has instructions to use Worktrees. But there's another way I like to add on top of it, just in case that AI ignores the instructions in Superpowers. So let me show you how I do that. So this is Visual Studio Code. I open up a Claude chat window. And in this case, we only have like the one file. So I'm going to tell Claude to create a new Claude.md file. If you're not familiar with Claude.md file, a Claude.md file is a file that's loaded on every context, and it gives Claude instructions on how to do things. It could talk about architecture. It could talk about coding standards. It could talk about different patterns you use. It could talk about where things live. Like, oh, this application's always, deployed to a Kubernetes cluster. And so that's the things you put in there, lessons learned, things that Claude needs to know every time it starts up with a new context. So I'm going to create a new Claude MD, and this is why I put Worktrees information here. And then I ask Claude, can you add a requirement for all work to be done in Worktrees? Okay, Claude's done creating the Claude MD file. Let's open it up and see what it created. So here, it just tells you what it created. It says all work must be done in Git work trees. Use isolated work trees for every task and to avoid polluting the main working tree. That's it. So this is how you can get work trees into your solution. And if you don't use a superpowers or a skill set like superpowers, then this is a way you can get Claude Code to use work trees in your project. Okay, let's start by creating a basic to-do app using React. So I'm going to tell Claude, you can see on the left side there, the files are just being created. So it's now done. Now let's ask Claude to run the dev server. So it starts up a dev server. There you go. Look at that. It's magical. Go back. So this is how a single instance of Claude works. But let's up the game a little bit. Let's try doing 3 instances at the same time. So let's go 1, 2, 3. The first one will ask, can you explore adding a database? Give me, so we'll start that one. Next one will be, can you start that one? What will it take to set up CI in GitHub? And so I have 3 tabs going. The first tab's already done, and I can tell because see this little dot here? This tells me that the agent has completed its task and either has something to tell me or needs my input. So let's go click on it. And so it talks about what it did, gives me a recommendation most of the time, and we can be like, sure, that sounds great. Let's do it. And the second one's done. It's talking about light and dark mode. And this one is done too. So let's go back and see. Here it is. There's light and dark mode. Look at that. It works. That's beautiful. So that's how you use Claude Code with multiple agents at the same time. What I find myself doing is going back between the tabs. I'll kick something off and then kick something else off. And then, as you saw, kick a third or fourth thing off. And I'll go back between the tabs and I'll see whatever one is done, little dot, I'll go back and either, complete the work, which is usually checking the code in or verifying or answering a question. And then I'll kick that off and then I'll go to the next one that's done and I keep going back and forth between the tabs. So that's how I use Claude Code with multiple agents and doing parallel execution. So other examples where I've used Claude Code, I recently needed to install Ubuntu on a server. Once I got everything set up in the hardware, I gave Claude Code, shell access and walked away. A few years ago, this would have been searching on Google for a tutorial and then spending hours installing the needed software. Nope. When I returned, 30 minutes later, it was done. My server and website were up and running. A bonus tip for you: use text to voice to talk to Claude. Simply download an app. There are many of them out there. I use one called Whisperflow. It's pretty straightforward. You download the app, you install it, you connect it to your mic, you're good to go. It is paid, and so it does cost around $200-ish a year. So there's that. There are other free apps out there. There's one I think called Super Whisper. Let's see here, superwhisper.com. This one here, I don't know. I think this is the one. One of them, you bring your own AI. So they provide the product, you pay, I don't know, $5 a month for their product, and then you put your own keys in. If this was helpful, hit the like button. It genuinely helps more people find my videos. And if you're new here, consider subscribing. I'm putting out more videos on AI and development because the space is changing faster than I can keep up. A few years ago, I thought AI coding wasn't quite there, but it's matured a lot in the last year. I haven't written a line of code in, like I said, 6 months. It still feels weird to say out loud that I don't code anymore, but that's where I'm at. Comments are open. If you want to talk about your setup, I'd love to hear it. I'm always open to finding new ways to do new things. Or find me on socials. All the links are in the description. Thanks for watching. Stay curious and keep learning.